This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Continuing coverage of Campaign 2000, the battle for the White House. From CBS News election headquarters in New York, here is Dan Rather.
Good evening. Another day of hairpin turns in the courts, and this bumpy and convertible election ride sizzler in the Sun Belt remains unsettled 10 days after Election Day. Here's the latest. Florida's highest state court has blocked the Secretary of State from certifying tomorrow who won, in her opinion, Florida's 25 electoral votes and presumably the presidency. That court will hear arguments Monday on Vice President Gore's request that hand counts and recounts in disputed counties be included in the final official vote tally. And then late today, the federal appeals court in Atlanta refused George Bush's request to stop outright all hand counts in Florida. 3 counties with more than 1.5 million votes are now involved in hand counts. Tonight, Miami-Dade joined Broward and Palm Beach. All 3 cut for Gore on Election Day so far. The recounts haven't helped him a lot. We have a team of CBS News correspondents to bring you the facts. Byron Pitts has the latest on the Tallahassee in Tallahassee. Byron?
Well, Dan, today has felt like a boxing match. Bush wins one round, Gore wins the next. It is a legal slugfest that won't end soon. Just when it appeared the Gore campaign was down and almost out, the state Supreme Court entered the ring.
The cases are consolidated and will be heard simultaneously. Arguments will be at 2 p.m. Monday.
In a unanimous ruling, the justices wrote, "We enjoin the Secretary of State from certifying the results of the November 7, 2000 presidential election." It was a stay, a legal reprieve that set aside an earlier ruling by a circuit court judge.
It appears that the Secretary has exercised her reasoned judgment.
That decision would have meant the Florida vote could have been certified tomorrow. At the time, the Bush camp thought the fight was over.
We now look forward to the prompt counting and reporting of the limited number of uncounted overseas absentee ballots so that the process of achieving a final result to the election in Florida is not subject to further delays.
Still, all day, the Gore camp kept punching.
We continue to believe that Secretary Harris was wrong to certify the election result before the recounts were completed.
Meantime, election workers in many of Florida's 67 counties have already begun tabulating the overseas absentee ballots due at midnight, an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 votes. But tonight it's now the million-plus ballots being recounted by hand in South Florida that could decide the fight for the presidency. The updated count from Palm Beach and Broward County, while not official, will no doubt become public this weekend. At this hour, with 35 of 67 counties reporting their votes, including overseas ballots, Bush leads Gore by 350 votes. So Monday afternoon is the state Supreme Court. Both sides have 1 hour for oral arguments. Dan?
Byron Pitts in Tallahassee. It remains the view in the Gore camp that hand counts will show that Gore got more votes than Bush in Florida, and therefore Gore will win Florida and the election. Gore's lead over Bush in the nationwide overall popular vote count has now widened to more than 260,000 votes. CBS's John Roberts is at the White House covering the Gore campaign. John?
Dan, just a few hours ago, Al Gore was facing the probability that at noon tomorrow, George Bush would again be declared president. Today's court decisions have given Gore the most precious commodity he could hope for: time.
I want to be clear. Neither Governor Bush nor the Florida Secretary of State nor I will be the arbiter of this election.
Like a political Lazarus, Al Gore came back from the brink today, the Supreme Court of Florida breathing new life into his crusade to count every vote.
That's why I'm very pleased that the hand counts are continuing. They're proceeding despite efforts to obstruct them.
Earlier, when it appeared Katherine Harris would move to certify the election at noon tomorrow, the vice president's advisors launched a last-ditch effort in the court of public opinion to cast doubt on the announcement.
I hope that Governor Bush will not attach finality to tomorrow's result, will not begin the partying, but will give the Florida Supreme Court an opportunity to act in the matter.
Now they have 3 days to build a case among voters that the hand count will turn the election. Democratic sources are publishing daily unofficial results of the recount, and today leaked their own projections that Al Gore will net between 800 and 1,300 votes in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade counties, enough they believe to win Florida and the presidency.
The citizens of Florida surely want the candidate who received the most votes in Florida to be determined the winner of that state.
The Gore campaign had been so concerned about the appearance of a Bush win that they even telephoned network news executives to remind them that any claim to victory would be disputed in court. Now, instead of damping an Austin celebration, the vice president will spend the weekend trying to convince America that the law and the votes are on his side. Dan?
John Roberts. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, it's been a day of ups and downs and turnarounds for the Bush campaign. They continue to emphasize we lead in Florida. CBS's Bill Whitaker has late details from Austin, Texas. Bill.
Dan, one Bush staffer said this morning's court decision was the happiest moment since they thought they won the election. Then this afternoon, the Florida State Supreme Court and the Federal Appeals Court in Atlanta knocked the wind out of their sails again. When Republican governors meeting in Tampa this morning heard a Florida court had cleared the way for the vote to be wrapped up and certified tomorrow, they broke into applause. In Austin, Texas, senior officials at Bush headquarters high-fived each other and started talking of the end game.
The one good thing about this process is that there is some certainty and some finality rapidly approaching.
But moments after Hughes spoke, the Florida Supreme Court spoke and put the campaign's hopes on hold again. Even before she got the word, Hughes seemed to sense things were in flux.
So the one constant is that things are changing minute by minute.
In fact, when Governor Bush decided to come in from his Texas ranch, he and his staff were feeling victorious. When he arrived in Austin 2 hours later, his presidential quest was in limbo once again, and Republicans were left repeating their mantra that the vote should be certified tomorrow and further manual counting can't be trusted, and neither can the vice president.
Al Gore, of course, is going to the left, going to the center, going to the right. He's just trying to find something that will stick to the wall, and so far he hasn't been successful, so he keeps fighting.
The campaign had desperately wanted Florida Secretary of State Katherine Harris to certify Bush the winner so that Vice President Al Gore would be in the difficult position of having to overturn a certified vote. Now the Bush folks and their attorneys are going over the papers, preparing for the big showdown Monday. Dan?
Bill Whitaker in Austin. Whether or not the hand counts and recounts wind up in the final official Florida tally, about 2 million votes in 3 counties are now being checked to see whether the count is correct and to see whether all votes that can be counted have been counted. CBS's Jim Axelrod is in the middle of this high-pressure, high-stakes calculation game.
They arrived before sunup, coffee in hand, looking 6 days of round-the-clock work squarely in the face.
I'll stay here for 2 shifts. I mean, if not enough people show up.
Dozens of vote counters in Palm Beach,
2,
and Broward counties, ready to get in democracy's trenches and go to work.
overvote.
Unanimous, no objection.
In rooms normally used to manage hurricane relief, they're doing what they see as their part to calm a nation's storm.
It's not exactly the best job in town, so I do want to thank everybody.
Canvassing Board Chairman Charles Burton, a Republican, says even though the Secretary of State may ultimately make all this work worthless, they're not about to stop.
There was a sense going into this that it was for naught, because Katherine Harris had said, I'm not going to take any more ballots. I mean, I think to really challenge her decision, you have to present her with votes and have her refuse to take them.
So for now, these volunteers continue their eye-numbing work in a somber room under the critical eye of party observers, knowing at the end of 6 tedious days, their work could decide the next president.
Well, that's possible. But, you know, this process has been going on for over a week now, and I think it changes minute by minute. I don't think anybody's thinking this is the end at this point.
Between Palm Beach and Broward counties, more than 1 million ballots will be recounted by hand. After one day, Al Gore has picked up 34 votes in Broward County alone. And that decision in Dade County means an additional 600,000 ballots will be hand counted from another heavily Democratic county. Dan?
Jim Axelrod in West Palm Beach, with both sides in this tension-filled equation, holding out hope that one major court decision next week might spell the end to all this, it's our duty to inform you folks that there's one more, at least, voting rights battle that could still get in and make this even tenser. CBS's Bobby Harley has that story from West Palm Beach.
Today in a Palm Beach County courtroom.
What authority do I or any other judge have to order a new election for president in one county in the entire nation?
Judge Jorge Labarga faced the issue that many Palm Beach voters say is the only fair way to find out who won. Not a recount, but a revote. A whole new election here that would almost certainly give Al Gore a victory in Florida. At the center of the argument, the legality of the so-called butterfly ballot. At stake, thousands of votes.
How was the atmosphere at the polling places? Confusion?
Very much.
For these registered voters, it was worse than confusing. Clara Green stood in line for 2 hours only to be told her name wasn't on the voter rolls at her precinct. No one could straighten out her problem because election hotlines were jammed with questions about the ballot.
This is my voter registration card. Been had it since 1966. I should have been able to vote.
Even a veteran Republican poll worker who doesn't support a revote admits it was a nearly unmanageable scene on November 7th.
It bothers me. They took the trouble to come out, you know. They wanted to vote. And I hated them to lose that privilege.
That type of ballot should have never been produced. Never.
Do you think that changed the results of this election?
It definitely did.
Next week, the judge will rule on those lawsuits. If he finds no legal grounds to support a revote, he told lawyers today it will be the most difficult decision of his life. Dan?
Bobby Harley in West Palm. Still ahead on the CBS Evening News. A new perspective on Vietnam, a country, not a war. And while the battle for the White House goes on, America finds it has much more to think about. President Clinton spent his first full day in Vietnam today, a visit the White House calls, quote, the capstone of a step-by-step process to normalize relations, unquote, between the former enemies. In a televised address, President Clinton told university students in Hanoi that after 25 years, the American people are beginning to think of Vietnam, quote, as a country, not a war. As CBS's Barry Peterson reports, many in a new generation of Vietnamese have already left the war behind.
It's 9 o'clock on a weeknight, and Long Van's disco is packed with young people who've traded Ho Chi Minh for hip-hop. And have some new national heroes, too.
Backstreet Boy.
Backstreet Boys.
Bye Girl.
Spice Girls. It's a new generation.
I like Celine Dion.
Pretty women like Julia Roberts.
Baby One More Time of Britney Spears.
They want CDs and cell phones, highlighted hair, and cool clothes. 40 million Vietnamese, half the country's population, were born after the Vietnam War. These remnants of the American war machine were left behind after the pullout. The communists thought a new day had dawned for their country. Little did they imagine there would be another day when the younger generation would look at all the things their elders fought and died for and say, so what? Do you ever think about the Vietnam War?
No, I don't like war.
They don't celebrate communism. They celebrate beating Singapore at soccer. And what about the once all-powerful party?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Yet, most surprising of all, their parents think this generation gap is just fine.
We are stepping into the 21st century, and the children cannot carry the load of memories of war into the future.
The old Vietnam is still there, but not for long, not with a new generation, with a new motto, don't look back. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Ho Chi Minh City.
The United States took steps today to mend relations with Yugoslavia. Belgrade's new post-Milosevic government officially resumed diplomatic relations with Washington, along with Britain, France, and Germany. Next up on CBS, Eye on America, the election situation. Are Americans frustrated or angry or what? Well, some are definitely crabby. With its tire sales down sharply, Firestone said today it's cutting production at plants in Tennessee and Oklahoma and laying off more than 1,000 workers temporarily, it says. Also today, a federal judge ordered Firestone to stop destroying recalled tires so some can be used for evidence in suits over accidents allegedly caused by defective tires. Following up on a CBS story reported earlier this week, a Colorado jury has now convicted a California man of criminally negligent homicide in a fatal ski slope collision. Nathan Hall, accused of reckless skiing, faces up to 6 years in prison for the death of a Denver man he struck in 1997. It is the first such conviction in Colorado, where skiing is a multi-billion-dollar business. 10 days of post-election tension, and we still don't know whose cowboy boots will be up on that big desk in the Oval Office come January 20th. But if that worries the American people, they're doing a pretty good job of keeping it under their collective hat, as CBS's John Blackstone reports in tonight's Eye on America.
For many Americans, these days of uncertainty have revealed not the nation's weaknesses, but its strengths. In San Francisco, at a remembrance for veterans, Reverend Alan Jones saw the resilience of democracy.
It's very impressive that we can go through a crisis like this. There aren't soldiers in the streets, there aren't armed guards everywhere.
Everything here seems to be status quo and steady as she goes.
On a ferry across San Francisco Bay, there seems little concern the ship of state is in trouble.
I'd like to see George Bush win, but if it works out otherwise, that's fine also.
Leanne and Brad Rosenstein aren't worried, even though they have an important new investment in the future.
She was born on Election Day, actually.
At least one decisive thing happened on Election Day.
In the park, where gentlemen play bocce, they know even the closest game eventually produces a winner.
Sometimes it's even. It's even. Sometimes we argue about it. That's what they're doing in Florida, I suppose.
In this election limbo, people see what the campaign sometimes obscures. The daily life is unlikely to change much, no matter who wins.
Because life goes on. We're soccer moms. It's not just Bush and Gore who have an agenda. We have a heavy schedule to continue with.
Exactly. My life is going to go on whether the president is George Bush or Al Gore.
The fight over the presidency is one thing.
Crab fight!
But in San Francisco, the big question this week has been, what kind of crab season will it be? On a balance right now, what's the most important thing to you?
Crab season.
Fishing boats are bringing in the first of this year's Dungeness crab harvest, and unlike a presidential election, nature won't wait.
There you go.
Strikes me you want to handle these even more carefully than they're handling those ballots in Florida.
Oh, definitely.
Of course, the nation still has a president, and even a lone protester is confident there will be an orderly transfer of power.
Well, in January, I plan to change it to the next president. That might become Al Gore or George W. Bush by January.
But Americans have plenty to do between now and January, and politics is only a small part of it. In San Francisco, John Blackstone for Eye on America.
While the election is tied up in court, we'll check in with the court jesters, as we usually do on Friday when the CBS News rolls on. Looking ahead in the battle for the White House, the Florida vote counts and recounts by hand go on in 3 counties after a federal appeals court denies a Bush request to stop them. Florida's highest state court will hear arguments Monday on whether those numbers should be included in the final official tally. This means Florida's Secretary of State cannot certify the winner of Florida's decisive 25 electoral votes tomorrow. She had planned to do that after completing the count of late absentee ballots from overseas by tonight's midnight deadline. And as the national debate over the vote count goes on, the late-night comedians say, count us in.
It's day 10 trillion in the Florida election debacle. I say we give it one more week, then we give ourselves back to England.
It just keeps going on and on.
Not to negotiate, but to
see, it just goes on.
It
doesn't stop. It just goes on.
Let me get serious here for a second. I had to go to the doctor today. You know why? I have a hanging chad.
George W. Bush suffered a slight puncture to his face when an elderly voter attempted to actually hole punch him.
Catherine Harris. And you know, I tell you, it's so funny. A lot of the comments in the newspapers and TV, they're talking about her makeup.
All right.
Oh, very catty, you know. They're saying, like, she doesn't know how to put on makeup, she doesn't know how to apply eyeshadow, she doesn't know how to put on blush. And you know who's saying this? Al Gore. Okay, because he knows the makeup.
Here's the latest from Florida. It's just about dead even. $3 million for Bush down there in Florida, $3 million for Gore, and I'm talking about attorneys. Those are just the attorneys.
And that's the way it goes in our constitutional republic, based on the principles of freedom and democracy, including one person, one vote, fairly counted. Tonight, and we may see you later, maybe not. Sunday on Face the Nation, don't forget Bob Schieffer will be along with some very interesting guests, including Howard Baker and Sam Nunn. Now from 60 Minutes, Morley Safer.
Why didn't this cop know before he shot and killed this African American that the man he killed was a cop? Sunday.
Stay with CBS News for the latest on the battle for the White House. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting from CBS News World and Election Headquarters in New York. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
The winners of this year's toy test on the Saturday Early Show. Experience CBS News.